time bomb. Members of the jury, today you heard about how the defendant went off and murdered Robin Warren. You heard about how a combination of alcohol, anger, and weapons makes the defendant dangerous to women. And you heard about how early in the morning hours of August 6, 2011, that combination caused the defendant to explode, killing his sister. On August 5th, the defendant was staying with his sister Robin and her wife Bradley at their lake house here in Lone Star. He was their guest. And on the day of the 5th, they enjoyed the nice weather, they enjoyed a few drinks, and they tried to enjoy spending time together. But the more the defendant drank, the angrier he got. He argued with his sister about money, about her marriage. And as the day went on, the defendant, not only did he get angry, but he got more and more aggressive. So finally, by 11 p.m., the defendant was shoving his little sister. Bradley decided that it was enough. And he told everybody to go to bed. He was trying to calm everybody down. Bradley thought that the shoving was as bad as it was going to get that night. But as we all know now, well, it was wrong. While Robin and Bradley went back to their bedroom, the defendant laid on top of his sheets, wide awake. He didn't calm down. He didn't go to sleep, like Bradley had suggested. See, the alcohol and anger had lit his fuse, and there was no way he was just going to lie there and go to bed. So when he heard his sister walk through the back door, headed to check the boat, he followed her, and he started back in on the old argument. He was even madder than he was before, and he grabbed his sister. At that point, she tried to free herself by scratching into his arms, tearing his flesh. But by that point, the time bomb had gone off. The defendant hit his sister over the head, and he grabbed the knife and plunged it into her heart. Alcohol, anger, and weapons set that man off. That's why Robin Warren is dead. Because that man is a time bomb. But how do we know that it was the defendant who killed Robin Warren? Well, there's three reasons. There was blood on the guest room sink and on the defendant's hands. The defendant's DNA was found under the victim's fingernails. And lastly, you can't trust Jamie Hill or the defendant when they told their stories on the stand. Now, that first point, that there was blood in the guest room sink and on the defendant's hands, that may not seem like a big deal at first, but let me explain. You see, after the defendant killed his sister, he went back to his room, and he had blood on his shirt, on his pants, and on his arms and hands. He started to wash the blood off in the guest room sink. And at that point, there was blood on the sink, but his hands were clean. Now, after he heard Bradley find Robin at 4 in the morning, he ran back out, he picked Robin up. And at that point, there was blood in the sink from earlier and on his shirt, pants, arms, and hands. The defendant's story doesn't make any sense because, as he told you, I never washed my hands. If he had never washed his hands, there would not be any blood in the guest room sink. Even worse than that, the defendant's DNA was found under Robin Warren's fingernails. Now, Mr. Grossman might get up here and he might try to say, oh, well, it happened at 11. But we know that it didn't happen at 11. Number one, those scratches were way too fresh for that. Number two, think about what it actually means to have DNA under your fingernails. When we say DNA, we're not talking about some little magic science thing. We're talking about someone's blood and skin.
Objection, Your Honor, assuming facts, not evidence.
Response, Your Honor, making a reasonable argument based on the evidence.
Your Honor, if I may respond.
Very briefly, no.
DNA evidence can constitute a numerous amount of things. To make the argument that it's only skin or blood has not been, there's been no evidence to play that.
Caused by scratching someone on their arms. That would constitute skin and blood. We're talking about someone's skin and blood underneath your fingernails. Think about that. What would you do if you had blood and skin under your fingernails? You'd go wash your hands. But Robin Warren didn't wash her hands because she didn't have a chance to. If she had scratched them earlier in the day, she would have gone, cleaned up. But she didn't do that because right after she scratched Alex Moore hit her over the head. She was unconscious. Right after that, Alex Moore stabbed her, and she died. Now, Jamie Hill and the defendant got up here, and they tried to tell you a story about abuse. They tried to tell you a story about how horrible Bradley Warren is. But you can't trust that story. Jamie told you that she had counseled Robin on numerous occasions, that she was a friend and a pastor. And she told you, Robin said, if anything happens to me, please tell the police. She told you that Robin came in time after time with bruises, time after time, saying the man that she lived with was beating her up to the point that she was afraid for her life. But time after time, even though, according to Jamie, Robin had said, please, get help from the police if anything happens to me. Time after time, Jamie didn't go forward. She didn't say anything. But what else did she say on the stand? She said she came forward the day after she found out that Alex Moore, her good friend, was facing charges for murder. And it was at that point that she decided, oh, I should honor Robin's memory. Oh, now I need to speak up because something has happened. Now is the time to do something about this abuse. After she's dead. That doesn't make any sense. Those conversations never happened because a good pastor, a good minister, a good friend would speak up and go to the police while their friend was still alive. What about the defendant? You can't trust any of his testimony about the night of August 5th because he had been drinking. Alex said he remembered what happened that night, but we know that he has no control when it comes to alcohol. We know that he went to rehab for drugs and alcohol for 6 months, that he relapsed, and that he went back again. But what was he doing on August 5th? He had relapsed again. He was drinking just like he never had a problem with alcohol in the first place. Now, how out of control did Alex get? How serious of a problem was this for Alex? It was so serious that he pulled a knife on his supervisor, who, by the way, was a police officer, and then he stabbed someone. Said that at that point, he was not thinking clearly because of drugs and alcohol. He told you on the stand, the night of August 5th, probably wasn't thinking clearly either. But he's asking you to take his account of what happened, despite the fact that he had been drinking. He's asking you to take that account at face value, and you can't do it. The night of the 6th, the defendant was drunk and he was angry. Angry from the argument, and even angrier from being told to go to bed. Who was Bradley Warren to tell him when that argument was over? We already know that Bradley and Alex don't like each other. Must not have felt very good when Bradley said, hey, you're drunk, go to bed. So he didn't go to bed. He sat on top of those sheets and he stewed. And when he heard his sister get up and walk out the back door, he said, I'm not done yet. I'm still having this argument. And he went out there and he started back in. At that point, Robin was afraid. She saw that time bomb go off. She tried to fight as hard as she could. That's why she clawed him on his arms trying to break free. But at that point, it was too late. The defendant hit her, the defendant stabbed her, and the defendant tried to make it look like nothing had happened. Because the defendant is a time bomb. Members of the jury, I want to thank you for your time and your attention today. In just a minute, Mr. Grossman's going to try to convince you that we're just rolling the dice here. But you've heard about all of the evidence that we've presented. There's no dice that have been rolled. You heard about the detective investigation, and about the DNA under the fingernails, and about Alex's problems with his sister. In a few minutes, you're going to be the only people in this state who can do anything about Robin Warren's murder. Every policeman, every detective, every hospital out there, they cannot help Robin Warren. But you can. So in a few minutes, I'm going to ask you to return the only verdict that's supported by the evidence, the only verdict that can help Robin Warren by doing her memory justice. I'm going to ask you to find Alex Moore guilty.
Prosecution.